Welcome back to Normal About Dragongate, my podcast miniseries. I'm posting these as I edit, but I'm attempting to keep these to fairly typical podcast length, so as of this post, I don't know exactly how many more episodes are coming because we talked for several more hours after this. We've already covered the independents, so join me and my co-host Eden once again as we get into Dragongate's units and each of their individual members. So, let's get into the units now. I wanted to do lowest ranking to highest ranking and then talk about the unit as a whole after that.
Okay.
So let's start out with our newest debut, Akihiro Sahara, my large son. I love him.
Friend-shaped.
Friend-shaped, yes.
Friend-shaped. I before he debuted officially, when they announced his debut, I ruined Sahara for Anthony forever by saying that he had Bear in the Big Blue House energy. And I stand by it.
And the thing is, he's a big boy, but he's not even the biggest boy. He's wide and he's dense and he's stocky, and they don't have a lot of rookies like that. So that's what really stood out to me when he was doing his future exhibition matches.
I enjoy the way he has that rookie affectation of he comes through the curtain, he yells one short, sharp syllable, and then he goes about his business.
Yeah, just just comes out, screams, and goes to the ring.
Which, I mean, relatable.
Yeah, and it's also kind of a theme with what all of the rookies from that class were doing in the they would all come out and scream. He still does it.
I mean, I'd keep that. It's weird. Keep it.
I like how quickly after his debut he was put into a unit, even though it's technically just it's a dojo, not a unit kind of thing.
The prevaricating with everything else, they couldn't do that again.
Yeah, and love how they did it with the whole Fuji thing, and I put my stock into him early just because of how he stands out.
Yeah.
Among the rest, just with his ring style and his body type. Seems to be able to cut a promo too.
Yeah, he can hold his own in a ring where there's literally the entire rest of the roster staring at him. So that puts him in good stead.
Yeah.
He does have something different about him. He's clearly got a way to go to find himself, as it were, but he's got a strong foundation just from the last couple of months of his debut.
I can't wait to see where he goes from here. I mean, and I'll get to this point when we talk about the dojo as a whole, that it's sort of an M3K situation, but for everybody, where it's like the point is to get them ready to go to somewhere else. And I'm really highly anticipating seeing where he'll go from here. It might not even be the units that are currently together. I mean, he might be in there until there's a massive shuffling and there's, completely different units. But I am really interested to see where he goes from here.
Yeah. Obviously, there's not a lot to talk about just because of time, but there's a space for him. Like, he's not going to get lost in the shuffle because he does have something unique.
And it's just the very few, especially younger guys who are bigger and beefier. I mean, you've got like Kikuta and Kato, but
Kato
and Ishin, of course. But that speaks to Ishin feeling like he's been around forever.
Yeah.
Sahara, I mean, sky's the limit with him, I think. Every unit is going to need a heavy, and I think he's going to, fill that role for years, staying healthy, knock on wood. Let's move on to Daiki Yanagiuchi.
Finally, something is happening with Daiki.
I would absolutely love if they would let him be Champagne Daiki on regular TV.
I really hope so, honestly. So on Prime Zone, I think he and Fuda are doing like a Valentine's Day at Club Yanagiuchi thing. Or at least that's what I understood. And I hope this kind of spirals because it's good for I really enjoy Fuda doing it as well.
Yeah.
Daiki has so much charisma that I would not have known just from what he was doing on main programming before Prime Zone restarted.
Well, I mean, speaking of, underdog characters like Genki and KZ, Daiki has incredible underdog energy.
Yeah.
And that may mean that he has a fairly low ceiling as far as how they're willing to push him, but I think he'll get a Bravegate run at some point, the twin or triangle. I just think that he's going to be a really good utility player.
I think you can get some really fun and interesting stories out of him now that we're seeing more of the scope of what he can do character-wise.
Yeah, he's started showing a lot more personality, and I
Yeah.
really enjoy that. Kind of the growing frustration that he had when he would almost beat Don Fuji and then lose. And now kind of that's transitioned over to his feud with Kato.
Yeah.
You know, even with that Captain's Fall match at Bayside, where he was involved in the finish but didn't actually get the pin, they're building up to it and they're giving him like little crumbs at a time, but it's growing.
Yeah.
That, I think, is the proper way to tell an underdog story, is that you don't want to, like, you want to make people beg for it.
Yeah, that's the thing. You can't give them the instant gratification, otherwise you don't have an underdog story.
Right. I mean, he was the captain in that match.
Yeah,
so,
that's not nothing.
Yeah. I mean, at the first major event of the year in what was just a really fun match,
It was
top
a
to
really
bottom.
good match. I really enjoyed it.
Every time he'd get close and not quite get there. And I think they need to move him away from the Korakuen janitor role, but that was definitely an Ultimo thing.
Yeah. It's a reasonable placeholder for where he's been for now, but that was obviously before he was doing things that had emotional stakes.
I mean, at some point, you got to get him away from that. It's just his entrance gear now, so it's not offensive. It's not like he's carrying around a mop and bucket everywhere he goes, and you know, using it in his matches or anything. It's not like it's like this is going to be a deep cut. But I remember there was a show about indie wrestlers a long time ago.
Oh no.
Where there was a guy who he wanted his gimmick to be like rapid fire, but he was a redhead, so the promoter was like, "Oh, you remind me of Opie, so I'm gonna make you like a delivery boy, and you'll come to the ring with a mailbag, and we're gonna call you Rapid Delivery instead." And it was like, yeah, okay, whatever, but it was just he had a mailbag that he brought to the ring, and then he got rid of it, and then he wrestled, and so it didn't affect him that much. And I kind of feel like that's where Daiki is right now. Is he's got that corny ass entrance gimmick that only Ultimo could bestow upon him, and he'll break out of that, you know, at some point. But he's got time. He's young.
Yeah.
And
I mean, the dojo's only just restarted, so this is barely the beginning.
And ring-wise, I really love how explosive he is. How, like, the way that he starts, usually like a tope suicida or a crazy dive. I really like the way that they let him kind of take the momentum early.
Yeah. It was for a while, it was a little bit of one of my frustrations with Daiki, and it's not a frustration with him necessarily, it's that you see it in a lot of younger wrestlers that have that kind of ability to be explosive, but haven't quite gotten the fine tuning and the fine motor skills for it not to look like they are about to just die every time, which again has its own thrills, but you can't be doing that throughout an entire match. We're getting to the point now where, like, well, we've been there for a while, where Daiki's found that rhythm where he can employ the I'm just going to throw myself at a guy in amongst everything else.
And also doing the move that's usually reserved for heels, which is attacking before the bell.
Yeah.
Cutting them off at the pass, like using their own technique against them. And I really like that he's this kind of like unassuming, smiley kid, but he's got like anger and frustration that he can tap into. And I think that's a really cool facet of him.
Because his stature and his sort of physical presence is on the smaller side. So he's always going to be underestimated. So he can use that against people.
Yeah. Just to bring it back to his entrance gimmick as well, I love that they just Don Fuji being a klepto that he is, he got jealous of the broom and stole it and started sweeping himself. It's like, sure, do my job for me.
How dare you carry things? I wish to carry things.
I think he has a higher ceiling than most people think. I love this for him, the whole position in the dojo right now. And I love that they're finally doing something with him.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on to Ryu Fuda. I think everyone is sort of universally frustrated with his treatment, like, or just his position.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I totally get it, because, you know, you're going to be gun shy on somebody who gets injured severely several times and has to, you know, had to take breaks and had people basically like lap his progress. But I think he's finally at a spot where they're using that to his advantage, where that frustration and that the fact that his peers have surpassed him is a source of his anger and a source of, you know, why he proposed the reunion of Mochizuki Dojo in the first place.
Yeah.
And because, like, if you watch him when they give him something to work with, like his singles match against Mochi where they just kicked the hell out of each other,
Ruled so hard.
like that was one of my favorite matches of the year.
Yeah.
That's one that was, I think it opened the card, so it was free on YouTube.
Yeah.
So I showed that to everybody I could. It's a testament to how good he is, but how hampered he is by just unfortunate circumstances. Fortunately, he seems like he's consistently healthy now.
Yeah.
And I love that they're giving him something to work with, both on Prime Zone and on, you know, the main roster.
Yeah, he feels like he's found an even keel, whilst simultaneously figured out what his physical presence can do as well. In the way that he stands feels a little less awkward than it used to be. He's figured out an aesthetic that I think was really strong, and the idea of using that communal frustration, the frustration that he and Daiki have in common, whilst I think as well as being something of a mirror or a foil to what's going on with Yoshiki Kato, tentatively, cautiously hopeful for Fuda over this year. Not least, again, the match he had with Mochi, the matches he was having on a couple of Buyudens as well, an incredibly strong showing. So unless there's something we don't know about, I don't think there's any reason why he shouldn't be starting to build that momentum.
Yeah, and I remember seeing people who were not happy with the fact that his win in the first round of the Young Dragons Cup was, you know, Zebrat's chicanery.
Yeah.
But I will say that, like, this goes back to what I was saying about knowing what I know about working in wrestling is that it probably wasn't nearly as important to him, like the outcome of that, because he's gotten wins in tag matches. He got you know, new gear. He got an entrance theme,
Which bops.
Yeah. And now he's got a unit, and that's a lot for a guy that they have been completely gun shy about for a long time. This is kind of like, I'm, you know, not saying that people need to settle for less. I just think people need to understand that those are big steps for him. And, well, I would like to see him get a decisive singles victory. You know, that's kind of never really been the point of Dragongate.
Yeah, I don't think it's really necessarily the point of wrestling either.
I think it's a very Western take on things.
Yeah, it's the sports thing,
so to speak. Yeah. Like you need your big singles win, and you need your first big singles win to be, you know, really important and significant. And I mean, other than maybe Kato getting his first win in an exhibition match, I really can't remember most people's first, you know, wins post debut. So it's not something that's really focused on. I remember, like, La Estrella beat Susumu on his debut, but if I didn't bring that up, would you even have remembered that?
No. The other thing as well is that if Daiki and Fuda had something decisive, if Fuda had taken a decisive win in the Young Dragons Cup, what would be the point of Mochizuki Dojo at this point? Literally, why would we be doing this?
Yeah, that's, you know, just taking on Mochi as a mentor doesn't automatically mean that you're going to start getting wins right away. Like, they're building up to it.
You still have to do the work.
They've even hit story beats in that, where Mochi has said, like, you know, a win's a win. And Jay, I mean, bless Jay to the ends of the earth. He injects story points even where they don't necessarily put them in the content. Like, he does such a good job of putting over, like, what the story is behind all these things. And on the Bayside commentary, he was talking about how even though like Mochi won that match for the unit, Daiki was instrumental in the finish, and like it's a win for all of them, and they can't be discouraged.
Yeah.
Just because of that, and they're working up to it. And the nature of it being a dojo is that he is training them to get better a little at a time, and they get closer and closer every time. And that again speaks to the underdog aspect of them.
It's also the thing is the very specific context of Dragongate. You're not training to headline the Tokyo Dome at Wrestle Kingdom. This isn't a singles focused promotion in the way that pretty much everything else is. So you have to learn how to be in a team as well.
Yeah.
And that's also important. And winning as a team is also important.
And I mean, every time there's a Triangle Gate match, they tell you, like, it's the symbol of unit supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
And the vast majority of the roster is, unit based. So people bringing in this idea of, like, big singles wins matter more. Like, I don't even want to say that's a Western view. I think that's just a view of anything but Dragongate.
Yeah, exactly.
And you have to come into Dragongate thinking differently about it.
Yeah, it's not necessarily anathema, but I go on about this, and other people that we know go on about this, but tag wrestling, trios wrestling in most other places is vastly underrated. It is devalued in a way that it absolutely shouldn't be. So I think sometimes people come into Dragongate with kind of the wrong perspective on how Dragongate themselves value what people are doing in units.
On that note, so few places that have trios wrestling actually use lucha tag rules, and I think that like regular just 2-on-2 tag matches, yes, absolutely, keep the tags.
That's fine.
Yeah, that's fine with me. If it's trios or more, use the lucha tag rules. Use the ring out equals a tag. It's
straight up
keep the action flowing.
Why you wouldn't. It makes it easier for everyone, and it makes it so much more exciting for everyone.
It's also just, if you don't have that, it's just a tag match with more people.
Yeah.
If you have like a 4-on-4 match, this person tags in, they get 1 minute and then tag out, because they have to, the old standard, get your shit in. And you can do so much more if you just have someone roll to the floor and have someone else come in and not have as much focus on like referee counts and things like that. So I don't know why more people don't do it. The weirdest thing is that when AEW had their trios titles on the House of Black and they were doing like a house rules thing, briefly they did have that rule.
Yeah.
And then they didn't keep it. And I felt like that was the perfect opportunity to say, like, oh, well, this works. Let's keep that rule forever and apply it to the belts no matter who has them. And they didn't do that. And it's just like one of many AEW missteps that I that I have criticisms about. It's like, yeah, it's better than the alternative, but it's not really an alternative.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a huge topic, and
Yeah, I mean, like, in general, I feel that way about all American wrestling, and that's why I fell off so much of it, is that I don't think they're really doing an alternative thing. I think if you want an alternative, the actual alternative is, stuff that is like lucha or pro res or joshi, or to some degree even indies. But, a lot of indies still try to be what's on TV.
Yeah, you kind of have to go outside of what is in your dominant culture.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's why, like, even though I work for an indie, I still see a lot of standard North American tropes being followed.
Yeah, nothing good ever comes out of narrowing your worldview in any aspect.
Yeah, that is one thing I will give AEW credit for, is not pigeonholing themselves into one style and allowing a variety. And I'll bring that back to Dragongate by saying, like, a lot of people, when they only see Dragongate guys on like indie shows where they're guesting, they'll be like, oh, they wrestle that hybrid style. And it's like, that's the basis of Dragongate, but Dragongate has so many styles.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
We're watching, like, Yamato in Dreamgate matches.
Exactly.
Where he is a mat wrestler.
Yeah, and even then, within those matches, he's having to do all sorts of different stuff depending on his opponent. variety is so important to wrestling, and I think it gets really undersold in most places what variety actually means in a wrestling context. That it's not just having multi-man matches in amongst so many cards that are just so singles focused, but the thing is that those singles matches tend to echo each other or reiterate things that you've already seen on the show that night. Like having a straight up nonsense comedy match in the middle of a 4 singles match run will do more for every single one of those serious matches around it than you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. If only just to switch up the tone.
No, you need that. You have to. I mean, there's no hard and fast rules exactly.
Mhm.
Like there's always edge cases, examples where that's not the case. But even if it's just varying the length of the matches that you have, making sure that people don't do exactly the same spots, and then again throw in a couple of tag matches. I can't go to another show that's like 95% singles matches unless it's specifically a tournament. I'm not doing it.
I did love that there was the Koraken with the one-on-one theme. That was really cool, and I hope they do that annually at least, just because it's an interesting change.
Yeah, it was different for Dragongate specifically.
Yes, if you look at most cards in other promotions, you know, you will have these just relentless cascade of singles matches.
And I find it hard to stay engaged, to put it
I
mildly.
like I look at New Japan cards and just looking at the card exhausts me because it'll be like this, you know, like half-hour singles match, half-hour singles match, half-hour singles match, and then it'll be like a 12-man tag just to get everyone on the card,
That you know doesn't matter.
which is very different from the way that Dragon Gate puts, you know, like a 10-man tag on their card, because it's thematic towards the style that they're doing. It's not just to say like, hey, you get a paycheck.
Yeah. It was like, oh, let's hope that the one random Don Fuji stan in the crowd. I say that as if he doesn't have like many stands, but you know what I mean. It's not like we're not
Yeah.
just appeasing the audience, because that's
Yeah.
insulting. Can we not insult our audiences, please?
Yeah, this is I mean, this has been a major tangent, but I think that actually kind of dovetails into the next one on the list, which is Masaaki Mochizuki. And my god.
How what beings is he in commune with
I know.
that he is still so fucking good?
I know. It's I mean I almost struggle with words because it's like nothing is superlative enough.
Yeah.
The man has had over 4,000 matches.
Oh my god.
He has not taken a break since the 1 month that he had a shoulder injury like 20 years ago.
Jeez.
More than that, actually. But God, he's, I say with no exaggeration, like if I was going to name the greatest of all time, it would be him.
Yeah.
I say that not just because of his longevity and his talent, but because of how consistent he is through all of that. Because other legends don't have the volume of matches that he has, or they fall off in quality after a while. I mean, we've even seen it recently. He still does dives outside the ring. He still does top rope moves. He will still kick the absolute shit out of you.
It is my I'm sorry, it is relevant. My favorite genre of wrestler is just ones that will kick people to death. I don't know what it is about people just kicking each other really, really hard that appeals to me in specific, but there is there is a definite, like, a timeline, a noticeable sort of flow chart of wrestlers that I really like, and they're all kick boys.
I mean, it's the reason why I still follow Kaito Ishida's career.
Kick boy.
Just a kick
kick
boy. Never stops kicking. And that's only one facet of Mochi.
Yeah.
Among many. And it's almost getting into that territory of what we were talking about with Ultimo, where like you kind of run out of stuff to say about him because he's so iconic. But I think with Mochi in particular, you know, other than just producing Buyuden shows, like he could easily be like a top promoter if he wanted to be.
He just has a sort of a sense for it, which you would hope after spending this long in an industry that you'd kind of get a feel for it. But there's a difference between sort of being around something so long that you know how it works and still being inspired in that space, you get excited when a Buyuden card's coming up because you know that Mochi's just going to pull dudes from just somewhere that he knows. But it's also going to be a rapid fire card that gives you so much variety. It gives you something different every time.
And with Buyuden shows, a lot of these people will be people that I've never heard of, and from promotions that I've never seen. Mm-hmm. I still doubt that Secret Base is real, but...
hey, you'll never know. That's why it's a secret.
Exactly. I can't say that I've loved everything top to bottom on every Buyuden card, but when it hits, it really hits.
Yep. I mean, I can be normal about Masaoka Jun now. Thank you, Mochizuki, for giving me that gift.
The way he books people that you maybe haven't heard of and really makes them look strong and interesting and makes you say, well, maybe I should pay attention to this guy.
It's happened multiple times, even just in the time that Buyuden's been happening that I've been watching. Like, I've started watching other stuff purely because of seeing people on Buyuden. Unfortunately, one of those things is freedoms, for better or worse. So take of that what you will.
I have very little exposure to freedoms.
It's certainly a promotion.
I know that it's that they go pretty heavily on the violent deathmatch kind of thing.
Yes, that tends to be at the top of the card, luckily. So usually I can judge where I'm at by that point and then tap out, because I don't really like deathmatch wrestling for the sake of it. That's entirely, I think it's a perfectly valid form of wrestling and a valid form of art. It's just not for me most of the time. But I've seen some stuff on Freedom shows I've actually I've jived with. I wouldn't go out of my way to recommend, unless I know very specifically what someone's vibe is when it comes to wrestling. I wouldn't go out of my way to recommend it. But
well, I mean, on that note, I already kind of knew about F-Swag before the last Buyuden show, but seeing them on that show, it doesn't necessarily make me want to check out Freedoms, but more of their matches.
Yes.
Specifically.
Exactly. Why I ended up at Freedoms.
Yeah, and I just always wonder how certain people ended up in certain promotions.
Isn't that always the question?
Apparently, though, YAMATO was in a tag team death match when he lost his titles, so I'm actually pretty curious about that.
YAMATO in Freedoms is one of the funniest things.
I don't know that I've ever seen him bleed before.
One of the best parts about it is that he is going out of his way to not do any of that.
Yeah.
He does not want to be there. He is in situations, and it's so funny.
Okay, so I will probably track some of that down at least.
I will point you in the direction.
Anyway, Mochi. When I saw him at West Coast Pro, it's actually how I have a Dragongate shirt with the red logo on the front, is that I bought it from him. I talked to him at the merch table with what very limited Japanese, conversational Japanese I actually have. I understand a lot more than I speak, but definitely a bit of a barrier with the things that we were trying to communicate about. But as soon as I mentioned Junior, he lit up, and he's so proud of his kid, and I mean, with good reason, but the fact that he leaves this legacy, and just how insane it was that they were able to keep that under wraps.
It's so wild.
You could never do that in Western wrestling.
No, because everyone needs to know everything all the time.
Like, I was thinking, if you debuted Hook without saying he was Taz's kid,
it would have been so easy to get away with that as well, because that's not, you don't,
because he doesn't look anything like him
whatsoever. No,
but people would have basically doxed him. It is one of, if not the greatest twists in wrestling, in my opinion, to bring on a rookie kid under an assumed name and then just be like, oh, he's actually my son that you didn't know about.
This is my whole actual son.
Yeah, just absolutely brilliant. And the fact that they were already wearing M3K shirts and nobody noticed. Yeah, like that got a reaction out of the crowd where people were like cheering and shouting when pandemic protocols were very much in effect.
When they weren't allowed to.
Yeah, just absolutely brilliant. The fact that that's how he introduced the next generation of Mochizuki. I can't say enough good things about Mochi. And Mochi, the GOAT, that is my stance on him.
Yes.
So yeah, let's segue into talking about Mochizuki Dojo as a whole. I did enjoy the first iteration. They were, I would say, a bit scattershot for some of their run, but I did mostly enjoy the theme of it. And this chapter, though, seems a bit more focused just because the way that Mochi's insisting that it's not a unit, it's a dojo.
As if taxonomically that makes much of a difference in Dragongate, Mochi. Nice try.
Yeah. I mean, especially considering that the previous iteration was a unit.
Mm-hmm. You've just got a different K-pop concept this time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the fact that because they didn't even lose the survival cage match, but they had the option to kick someone out, and Shun kicked himself out. But just the fact that they were in a match like that at all, I mean, yeah, it was a unit.
Yes.
But this one just calling themselves, saying, like, we can't technically disband because you can't stop me from teaching these kids.
It's very, this sign can't stop me because I can't read. And that kind of belligerence is, it's so Mochizuki coded. It's so funny. And again, we don't 100% have a clear, like, we have an idea of the sort of mission statement of Mochizuki Dojo, but like it's still brand new, even if it has had an iteration before. So we can't really talk about its place in storyline or anything because we don't know what that is yet.
And just being such a fresh take on the previous concept in a way that's different from other units that have had new chapters, like where Natural Vibes reformed with a different cast, but we're still the Dancing Party Boys.
Yeah, this one has a different goal.
I'm really interested to see where they go and who else joins, actually.
Ooh.
I'm wondering if we're gonna see the other 2024 rookies anytime soon.
Will we solve the mystery of Kame's dad?
Well, he's a 2025, so...
I know. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if they're around long enough, eventually they could be. But yeah, I'm curious to see where Oshima and Tsujiguchi end up.
Yes.
How long they're going to hold off on their debuts, too, because I think Daiki was the only one who they delayed to the next year. He debuted, I believe, in March of the following year. And that was only because of an injury delay. So, yeah, I kind of wonder if they're just not ready yet, or...
Oh, they're moving something.
By the way, I'll have to show you this. I'll send this to you, but I have been tracking rookie sightings on a spreadsheet for the past month or so.
Oh, I live. That's the kind of weird nerd bullshit that you do.
Yeah. I mean, just for my own purposes, because I want to see how frequently these kids show up. I don't count anyone after their debuts, so Sahara still works ringside sometimes, but he's not on the list.
He's a known quantity.
Yeah, I started it at the beginning of January, so it's got all the January shows. And if you're wondering, Oshima has been at 5 of the 8. Tsujiguchi was also at 5 of the 8, but they rotate out, so they're not always at the same ones. The one known as Ugly Kid, which has to be an ironic nickname because he's not an ugly kid, he's been at 6 of the 8, and Kame's dad has been only at 4 of the 8. So
how dare he not show up for his son like this?
Just a little side.
More spreadsheets.
Little side
More
hobby.
Spreadsheets.
Actually, the only spreadsheet I actually keep, because I don't do the whole like spreadsheet and notebook thing that so many people do.
Yeah, no, I don't do that either.
Yeah, I would rather remember something as a moment in time rather than how statistically it measures up against everything else.
Yeah, I write stuff down, but not with like a quantification.
So, yeah, I think that about wraps up what I want to say about Mochizuki Dojo, unless you have anything to add.
No.
Let's move on to Kung Fu Masters.
Well, let's...
Chapter 2 specifically. If you look in the Gaura list, there is a 2 at the end of the name now.
There is indeed.
And we've already talked about Punch and Genki. I know Reach is a Mahjong reference.
Oh, well, you know more than me. I've never gotten to grips with Mahjong.
That's about all I know about Punch's persona in that.
I mean, you say persona.
I mean, it's really just Punch in a headband.
I was going to say, like, it is mostly just sticking around. So...
Mm-hmm. Genki is Holy. I don't get that reference either. Yeah, he seems to have fun with it. I don't know what's up with the sword.
I don't know.
But I like the bit.
Yeah, it's just bits. Give him a silly hat and some tiny glasses and he's away.
Yeah. They haven't done as much towards I don't even know if it's explaining it so much as just having a group character kind of thing, as the first chapter did, where, you know, it was the whole thing about the restaurant and
Yeah.
how they actually had segments of them working in a restaurant.
Oh, rip in peace.
This first chapter I thought was a fun little side project. I liked the whole thing about how Casey was confused as to whether they were leaving Natural Vibes or not.
Reasonable questions to have. Are you abandoning me for your Chinese restaurant venture?
Right.
When we could instead be doing fun dances and rap, I guess.
Yeah. It's also funny that it kind of formed as Jason Lee's apology to Ho-Ho for attacking him.
Well, to be fair, he was really mean in that match, so...
Yeah. I mean, I'm generally talking about the group as a whole right now, so I'm kind of doing this out of order. But in between those, I had actually reached out to Ho-Ho and asked him what's going on with the unit, and he says, I'm a one-man unit right now. Because I said, like, is the restaurant closed? And then shortly after that is when he started chapter 2. I don't really know what there is to say about Reach or Holy, since we already addressed the two of them separately.
It's just an extension of the bit.
Yeah, so let's talk about Ho Lun. Just absolutely delightful human being.
The way he will, on commentary, just out of nowhere, read Jay to absolute filth to the point where Jay just stops for a second is my favorite thing.
I love their dynamic on commentary.
It's so funny.
But I think a lot of people just don't really realize how much he does.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he books his own promotion in Hong Kong. He helps book promotions all over Southeast Asia and in China, and he is he books everybody overseas on the North American tours.
Yep.
Like, he's the contact for that.
And in the UK here as well.
Yeah.
With Brit King.
Yeah, I have sadly not been able to line up one of our show dates for him sending people over, but he is my contact for that, and you know, we've talked about it multiple times. Usually, Prestige gets the dates that that we're trying to get.
Yeah.
I wish Pacific Northwest promotions would work together to not step on each other's toes, but you know, it happens. I don't think he's actually come to the Pacific Northwest promotions in their home venues. I think this will actually be the first time.
Oh.
He has been all over the place. I think he's usually based in Texas. Mr. Toshio, I think it is, who hosts them in Texas. He shows up on commentary every once in a while.
Yeah.
I think that's where they're based out of. So I've told Ho-Ho that wrestlers don't need work visas to wrestle in Canada.
No.
I know he is interested in potentially doing that. If I could get him in like a cross Canada tour, that would be really interesting.
Let me know. I'll be there with bells on.
He's also just like really improved as a wrestler. I remember him getting a lot of criticism.
Yeah.
Just a lot of people who are only familiar with Ho-Ho's ring work from the Cruiserweight Classic are doing themselves a disservice, and him a disservice, by not keeping up with him, because he has gotten a lot better. And it's the kind of thing of like, yes, he is outshined on the roster by a vast majority of the other wrestlers, and part of that is just not coming up through the Dragon system, but he has improved by leaps and bounds, I think. And I think it's also just really important to mention how busy he is aside from that, and how much he does. I mean, it's wrestling, it's touring, it's commentary, booking all over the world.
Oh yeah, I couldn't imagine even doing a fraction of that. And I work an office job. Like, I send my little emails. I couldn't juggle that amount.
I mean, even from a perspective of working in wrestling, I can't imagine doing a fraction of the stuff he does. It just seems so overwhelming, but his work ethic is incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing but respect for that man, and absolutely delightful guy to talk to.
Perhaps I shall say more than 3 words to him the next time.
Yeah, he's very personable, and I think that's part of the nature of, you know, his job is he has to be a people person.
Mm-hmm. That's probably why I definitely couldn't do it.
I would not mind seeing him in a unit now that he's officially signed, which, you know, great for him. I love that for him. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I don't think he needs it. He's
booked and busy.
He's got his own unit. He's doing way more than probably anybody else in the company as far as like what his
more than
duties are.
Humanly possible.
Yeah. Oh yeah, in addition to all that, he's also the merch guy.
Oh yeah.
we already kind of talked about Kung Fu Masters as a whole, but in general, I find them completely inoffensive.
It's certainly a unit that exists and is there. Banger theme, though. That's the most important part.
I kind of like enjoy the little rotating cast. I know they teased Chapter 3 without actually doing that, because Jackie guested for one show before he joined Gold Class, and then they had Mondai Ryu show up as himself and as Shenlong too.
He contains multitudes
on separate shows. Yeah, so I'm not really sure what the official lineup is for that, or whether Chapter 3 is even a thing.
It's whatever it needs to be. The true spirit of Kung Fu Masters is a concept. It is whatever it means to you for it to be a Kung Fu Masters.
And I'm glad it exists to give Ho-Ho something where he can be in the spotlight for a little bit. I definitely feel like their peak was obviously the Kobe World Tag Match with Jason and Jackie, but
my God,
they were both in Natural Vibes at the time, so
what a peak.
God, yeah. That was my match of the year that year.
I think about it constantly. Honestly, it's one of those matches.
Yeah, I need to go back and rewatch that.
Yeah, we should do that.
And also just the drip from Shun and Diamante. Those like Venom inspired outfits.
Yeah, I mean, you know that I've been thinking way too much about Shun Skywalker lately, and it's one reason why I was thinking about that match recently, was because I'm thinking about that gear specifically.
Like obvious peak of Kung Fu Masters, but also just kind of a shared peak with Natural Vibes because of who was in the match, and neither of which are apparently officially in Kung Fu Masters anymore.
How fast the night changes.
So let's move up to Paradox and start with Naruki Doi.
Let's get serious.
Oh my God, Naruki Doi. It is really still funny, but also impressive to me how he quit Gold Class after forming them to settle down a bit, and he has done anything but settle down.
Yeah.
I need to nurse this neck injury I have. I'm gonna go part-time. I'm gonna go freelance. Can't do the Gold Class thing anymore. And then he just shows up everywhere. To the point where he's doing like sometimes 5 matches a week. Sometimes he's doing 2 promotions within a day.
Every week is WrestleMania week.
Yeah, he's the
It's the Speedball Mike Bailey.
Yeah, he's the Speedball of Dragongate.
Very sure.
Which why has Speedball not been in Dragongate, by the way?
I've had this conversation with multiple people. Mochi
is the GOAT, I will say. Naruki Doi is the tag team GOAT.
Yeah, Heike.
As much as I do love his singles matches, because he's so good and so consistent, when he has been part of a tag team where he can really get into the tag dynamic is where he truly excels. And whether it's with Yamato, I mean, like, Yamadoi was my favorite tag team of all time. Even surpassing Speed Muscle for me, because like as great as Speed Muscle was, I actually preferred Yoshino as a singles wrestler.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know why. I don't know if I can articulate why, but he was always just somebody that I loved watching in either multi-man sprints or on his own.
I've described Yoshino as being the platonic ideal of a Tour de France winner, just because he's got such a specific physical build.
He's got the Dorito build.
Dorito build. Anyway.
But yeah, just whether it's with Yamato or Yoshino or Dragon Kid, any time you see Doi in a tag match, it's gonna be good.
Yeah.
And I love that for the last Rey de Parejas, where it was kind of like Doi and Dragon Kid, I don't know, is this dynamic going to work?
Can they
Are they just
ever
kind of
get
being
along?
thrown together? Yeah, and what came out of that, where, not only did they win and get the belts back, but just like how consistent they were as a team. I mean, we'll get to him in a bit, but just like with Dragon Kid, just not really a dynamic that of course they're great together because they're both great, but Not Hug is a team where I never really thought of it before. And how well their personalities mesh with Dragon Kid desperately wanting to be accepted and Doi just being like the perennial asshole who
just belligerent
just like
about
is having none of it.
about everything. But that's Doi.
I mean, I want to say Doi's most consistent character trait is betrayal, but it's even more consistent that he's just a dick.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Is it betrayal if you kind of saw it coming the whole time?
Yeah.
Like a lot of people in Dragongate do have chronic backstabbing disease, but Doi's just mean. He's just a bitch.
Yeah. Well, that's how, like, if you look back at Speed Muscle, it was Masato Yoshino just trusting Doi over and over and over.
Just a revolving door of bad decisions.
I maintain that the only reason that didn't happen in Maximum was because that's when the Generation War happened and all the units disbanded.
Yeah, it just got in there at the wrong time.
If it went long enough, I guarantee you Doi would have betrayed Maximum.
Oh, inevitably.
I want to say they were my favorite unit of all time, but I'd have to think on that. But I loved Maximum. Just the lineup and the matches they had, and also just First Finger.
Yeah, if we were talking about S tier theme songs.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Doi's fantastic. I hope he's got several years left in him.
Well, he seemed to bounce back relatively quickly from the knee injury, so he's hoping.
I think part of that is also he is technically as a freelancer on a part-time schedule, even though he is going hard, but he is not going
still working. Yeah,
he's still, I think, not going at the pace that he was before, where they would do, like a house show every day.
Yeah.
So I think even though he is still working a lot, he's still got a lighter pace than he had before.
Well, it's the thing that I think people do tend to forget about Dragongate is that they don't phone in house shows.
Right. I'm hoping that the consolidation of the YouTube channels and also the fact that they've started bringing a handheld camera with them, I'm really hoping that we'll see the return of house show
Fingers
footage.
crossed.
As much as people complain that Nakazawa, the music man, doesn't want to do it anymore, it's also kind of not his job.
Yeah.
And I get it.
Yeah.
Like, as somebody who works in post-production in wrestling, it's not his job to do all of that stuff and the music.
Yeah, they're both two jobs that are a lot more involved than I think a lot of people realize if they're not things that people do actively.
If you just have the hard cam footage on house shows, it's really not that difficult, but there is still the setup and the transportation and the production and post-production, and people just expect that it's a really easy job, and like I could do it, but that is my actual job. So it's not something that I think that just anybody could do. It's not just like, oh yeah, give a rookie a camera and be done with it. There's more to it than that.
I was going to say that could go so wrong in ways that people do not realize.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about anything. I will take whatever footage they give me, please and thank you.
And I mean, we were spoiled for a while, honestly, because they weren't even, I mean, we couldn't even get full shows for a while. We were getting clipped shows, if anything. Even the whole thing about not taking down videos for a year is fairly recent. Like, I mean, I remember having to get to a show within 2 weeks or else it's gone for however long.
Yeah, I came into this whole thing at a very comfortable time in terms of access.
Just coming from a time when Jay was literally the only source of information. Even the situation we have now is improved by leaps and bounds. So could be better, but it is still better than it was.
Yeah.
Anyway, with that tangent.
We're good at that.
Let's move to Kagetora.
Kagetora. I have been more in my Kagetora era lately than I expected. He still doesn't completely click for me. Not because of anything he's doing or anything I'm doing. It's just, I don't think he's really, until recently, he's really been in a position that sort of sparked my interest. But I always appreciate a good chop. So
I would say he's probably one of the best, if not the best, utility players on the roster. He's able to fit into pretty much any role or position that they need him in, and not everyone can do that.
Yes.
He is, and I don't mean this in a negative way, because I know there was that dumb thing about Jay White a while back is that I would call him like the tofu, because he absorbs the flavors of whatever's around him.
Sure. And
that's not said in a disparaging way at all. Like, I remember when that whole thing was going on with Jay White, I was like, tofu's great in a dish because, it augments things. So, like, why is that even an insult? He doesn't stand out charisma-wise a lot of the time.
Mm.
But like anytime I see him,
Yeah,
I always enjoy him.
exactly.
I wouldn't call him a leading man type as far as units go. I think, Paradox is the best place for him right now. But yeah, that's not to take anything away from him. I think he's just, he's better as just like a technical guy and utility guy. He's a great striker. Anytime he just whips out a series of Apache punches is just like, that always gets me.
Clatterful.
But yeah, he's one of the guys that I struggle to say a lot about, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't know if this will make sense, and it speaks to the fact that he did go away for a little while after Toryumon X failed and then came back later. But he kind of feels like a guy who didn't come up in the Dragon system, even though he did.
Interesting.
He has a different style, and not a clashing one. I just feel like there's something, like he's taken more of that outsider versatility that I think a lot of the guys on the roster don't have. When people say Dragongate is the hybrid style, I think of Kagetora as having a true hybrid style.
Yeah, he's more like a chimera.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of everything in there.
Even aesthetically.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, because if you look at some of his ring gear, it's very kind of like mishmashy a lot of the time.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting aesthetic calls. Like the mask is so structural, and then you have this diaphanous overcoat, and like he's kind of a, oh god, no, he's a strange set of paradoxes. Kill me now, that was not deliberate. But in a way that's,
I get it,
yeah,
though.
in a way that's kind of understated though. Like it's not so contrasty as to be off-putting. Like he doesn't twig the something's wrong here. There's a sense of belonging in that eclecticism.
I really like, he has a robe, but he also has trunks that are like this, where it's separated into 4 quarters, and one is like each of the seasons. He has like a 4 seasons type of gear. He's one of those guys that doesn't stand out a whole lot, but I would miss him if he wasn't there.
Yeah, and if you put him in a bigger match, he will step up to the plate and beyond.
Oh, he absolutely delivers, yeah. I have mentioned this before, but I always forget that he is Bravegate weight.
Anytime, dude. Well, I mean, maybe not now.
Yeah,
but
he's a bit shorter and a bit lighter than I always think he is.
it's impossible to ever really get a full understanding of how tall anyone is in wrestling ever is, because the amount of times that I remember like the guys that were out in Philly and standing near them and thinking, oh, that's how tall you actually are, and then putting that in context with the other people that they're in the ring with.
Yeah, I saw Yamato at a Prestige show a couple of years ago, and I was amazed at how much taller I was than him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of, there's always a stark reminder of that when you see like Shingo Takagi on a Dragon Gate, like on an old Dragon Gate show, and then you see him guesting in AEW or even in New Japan, where he's not like the biggest guy, and he used to be the biggest guy.
Yep. It's like when you finish primary school and you move up to junior.
Yeah. So let's move on to Dragon Kid.
Dragon Kid.
Fly into the sky.
He does that.
And how? Dragon Kid is just, he is a baffling person to me because of the insane amount of conditioning that he has for his age and his level of experience.
I'm not sure he's real. I don't, this isn't how things should work.
I mean, even having seen him in person. Yeah.
I don't believe my own eyes.
I mean, I guess if it's just you're training at an insane level every single day, you're going to look like that and you're going to move like that.
Yeah, but even then, like, for most people, that would not have this effect.
No, he's an absolute phenomenon. The fact that he can still go at a high level,
he can still
is just incredible.
Do it all. Absolutely absurd.
I know that he has the neck brace off. He's doing better. It is a bit concerning that Jay said that he's still experiencing numbness, but he's gonna get back in anyway.
That's the kind of bullheadedness that you only really get from athletes.
Like, oh, I'm not in pain anymore, so that's the measure.
The only reason you're not in pain anymore is because you can't feel anything, DK. That's not positive.
I mean, as somebody who experiences chronic neck pain,
Yeah.
like I know how debilitating that can be. his injury was mine's degenerative and it's long term, but his is kind of like a sprain that is very similar. So it would be like the temporary version of what I have.
Oh God.
So I can definitely empathize with that.
Yeah, you know better than most.
Just freak accidents happen in wrestling all the time, and
they do.
And I hope he's got a lot more mileage left, because the day he retires, wrestling changes.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. The entirety of Joshi wrestling will collapse.
Oh my God. He has probably influenced more wrestlers like Joshi and just cruiserweight wrestling in general than probably anybody else who's active right now.
I mean, I've spoken to multiple UK wrestlers that cite him as one of their influences.
Like, I know wrestlers who are not even anywhere near his body type who still say like he's a huge influence on them. There's a local big guy who loves Dragongate, so I've connected with him on that, and he says like, yeah, Dragon Kid is like my favorite of all time, and like he inspires me to like go to the top rope, even though I'm not the like type of guy who does that. Just it's his influence is, I think, immeasurable, and even to a point where, you know, you want to say, looking at like Toryumon and Dragongate as a whole, you want to say like, oh, Ultimo is so influential for all of this. It's like, I think Dragon Kid actually surpasses that.
I would be inclined to agree, as someone that's come into the promotion recently. So my perspective
even outside
is a bit
of the
different.
promotion.
Yeah, that you see how wide-reaching it is in the way that people don't always talk about necessarily.
It's the reason that they keep bringing him back to North America is because he has that iconic status in a way that I think major names who have come out of this promotion don't. If you hear that Dragon Kid is going to be on a card, people know what they're getting.
Yep.
And people will go out of their way to see that, even if they're not Dragongate stands like we are.
But it's also because, I know multiple people, because DK came over for a show at the beginning of last year. Unfortunately, not one I could make. But I know a couple of people that don't watch Dragongate that went to that show specifically, kind of slightly in the middle of nowhere show, and they went out to see him specifically. There's just so much about Dragon Kid that's iconic in the way he stands, his gear, even before the way he moves in the ring, the way he gets into the ring.
That whole like flagpole pose that he does with the ring corner just is insane to me. And the man is pushing 50 and he's doing that.
I don't have enough core strength to do one sit-up. How? How does anyone do that to begin with, let alone for how long he does that? They do this as a challenge on like Survivor, and people can't do it as long as Dragon Kid can. And they train for that.
He's in the most insane shape.
Wild.
His legacy is entirely deserved.
Yes.
Out of everybody on the roster, he's the one guy you can say is, you know, known by pretty much everybody.
Yep. Yeah, it kind of transcends Dragongate in a lot of ways.
Yeah. What else can be said about the man? I hope this injury doesn't slow him down. I hope he makes a full recovery. But also, take your time,
dude. You deserve it.
Let's go to Susumu Yokosuka.
Speaking of eras,
I think it speaks to Susumu's ability that there are so many wrestlers that I would like to see him against.
Yes.
In a like a pure technical match. Sadly, very few of those I will ever actually get to see.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't wrestle in most other places. But he is on this tour coming up.
Yes. So. He's one of the ones that I hadn't really considered all that much who might be coming out to Vegas. But the second that Susumu was announced, I was like, I get to see Susumu? Excuse me?
Yeah.
And I was very excited.
Nobody for the Defy show has been announced, and it's not a big hassle for me to get down to Seattle, but Portland is a bit of a hike. And even if it was only Susumu at that show, I would make that journey. It's like watching a master craftsman at work, like an artisan, like a true artisan. How innovative he is and how he's just been so consistent in his entire career.
I think about the work he was doing at Bayside with Kikuta specifically, when they were just slamming into each other. with the jumbo and the lariats, and the fact that somehow I forget how exciting and vital Susumu can be in the ring. And then you get reminded in that way. And it's just, that's one of the thrilling parts of Dragongate, is that people can sort of step back out of the limelight for a little bit. And they stop, they don't pull focus for a little bit. And then they'll step back in and remind you of just how good they are, seemingly out of nowhere.
It's also really interesting with his style that, he is such a great mat wrestler and grappler, but one of his major signature moves is a jumbo lariat.
Yeah, just hit you. Just hit a guy.
Yeah.
Love that.
It's really interesting when you see anything where Susumu and Kondo are on opposite sides of the ring.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Just competing lariats, just blasting each other. I don't know. Susumu is one of those ones where I can't necessarily come up with a ton of stuff to say about him other than just I absolutely respect his craft, and he's the best at what he does over a long period of time.
If we're talking about people that have never taken a break.
Yeah, geez. He's slowing down a bit, but, this kind of like elder statesman position in Paradox is really interesting. Really, it's just him and Dragon Kid who are the originals. Yes. Everyone else is a rookie compared to them.
Yeah, these young upstarts.
I mean, you have Kagetora and Doi came in like the tail end, but then you have like YAMATO and BxB Hulk who are comparatively youngins.
These children, they don't know they're born.
There's another just interesting facet about, not that he's necessarily like an outwardly funny guy in general, but I think there's an inherent comedy that comes from Susumu having to change his name all the time.
Yeah, this is a revolving door. Who are you this week?
And the fact that he even lost his name and took it back anyway, and then eventually Kai was like, oh, I don't care. Man of many faces.
And he still hasn't found a hairstyle to suit any of them. Oh, that was a read. Sorry, that was mean.
No, I actually love that about him, just because he's like, at some point he embraced the Karen hairstyle.
Yeah.
And it actually works for him.
You just got to go with what you have, not what you want.
The one thing about his aesthetic that I'm not sure entirely works for him is the like plastic dragon mask.
I'm not 100% sure where that's come from.
I don't know, it looks like something I would have bought when I was like 6 years old on Halloween. He's still got the varsity jacket too a lot of the time.
You see, that works. That's a look.
Yeah. And I think out of the former M2K, he's the one that I tie the most to that look.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's move on to BxB Hulk.
BxB Hulk.
I love that he's always kind of corny.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean.
But I love that about him.
Yeah, I love that there was a lot of, everyone was distraught when he had to leave Gold Class, but everyone was like, oh, but Goth Mom's back.
Mm-hmm. Even though it was pretty brief, I loved the reappearance of Jeff Hardy Pants Darkseid.
Listen, you've got to be the change you wish to see in the world. You got to channel it just to stick it to Shun Skywalker. He deserves it.
Yeah, and it had this great little undertone of
these are my I'll kill you pants.
Well, what I was gonna say is because Gold Class was in danger of being disbanded on the same card, so that whole thing was kind of just this undertone of like, I'm protecting my boys from the shadows.
Oh, he's the crow.
Yeah. You killed him, but he's back.
Yeah, that's one of the fun things about Hulk, is that he's so edgy, but in a kind of not edgy at all way.
And when he's not, the other side of the spectrum of BxB Hulk is the boy band side.
Yeah.
He's managed to balance boy band aesthetics with goth aesthetics, and it's a
husband and a mother. Is this the kind of commentary you really wanted on your on your Dragongate YouTube channel?
Honestly, for BxB Hulk,
yeah, it's
specifically,
true.
Yes.
Correct.
Because as great as he is, and I mean, talk about kick boys. Oh my God,
kick boys.
It's not every match, but when he hits a first flash, like right to the face, I like my whole body cringes.
Whereas I'm here like, yeah, do it again.
I mean, in a good way, but. Oh, there was one he hit, I think it was right after he came back as Darkseid, where he hit one on Kota Minora that just like I jumped out of my seat. I was just like, oh my God, that looked insane. He's obviously slowed down because of injuries, but he's still at a much higher level than most people, I would say. I'm not sure why he insists on continuing the skirt sort of thing that he does with his
Leave him alone.
his pale thighs. It is a choice.
A sort of like tabard experience. I can't remember the actual word. Sort of Romanesque energy. Yeah, it's just such an iconic. I keep saying this. It is just such an iconic look, though, when it comes to Hulk. He's one that's figured out a very specific set of aesthetic calls, and he always plays into those for the right reasons, even when they were in god-awful RED red.
I do appreciate that he has kind of settled on a middle ground for his look, where he's kind of dark side, but he's back. There's multitudes of the dark side Hulk aesthetic where he could go either full vampire with like the bottle, but like what he's got now is more of like the dark side hero sort of thing. Which is more than when he was just like gold class pretty boy.
Yeah, for as much as I love gold class, Hulk was kind of just there.
Yeah, I mean, they added him because, like, he's kind of been coasting on the pretty boy reputation for a long time. Even though he's, like, he's aged a bit and he's not the prettiest anymore. I guess, like, his portraits are still one of the top sellers in the company.
Yeah.
Because of that reputation.
I mean, lean into it. If you got it, flaunt it.
He's always good as backup still.
Yes.
Him as a top guy, that ship is sailed just because he can't perform at that same level anymore, at least not consistently. But if you see him in tournament matches, or sometimes they'll just have him as like one-off undercard matches, he still brings it.
Yep, he'll still put on a banger.
Let's move on to the ace, Yamato.
Oh, now. Now it's time to have some opinions.
Oh.
No, don't worry, none of it's controversial.
I mean, I will let you have the floor for that.
No,
before I get into it.
I don't think would anyone be surprised. I love Yamato. Like, I mean, you've been around me when I've been watching Yamato matches, and I keep bringing it up, but that match that he had at the ETU show with Santana is literally one of my favorite live match experiences ever.
Oh yeah, that was phenomenal.
Like the atmosphere in that room was just immense.
Yamato is, especially when he's like fully decked out in his big match gear, his like big robe and all that, is that's when people, I mean, it's a cliche at this point, but when people bring up aura in wrestling,
yes,
Yamato is who comes to mind for me.
It's because it's one of those things. A lot of people, when people talk about aura, when people talk about presence in a performer, they tend to look at the aesthetic application, the visuals of it. They don't realize how much of it is literally just in the sort of physical gravity of a person.
Right.
And a lot of that doesn't come across a lot of it can, and especially it depends on how something's filmed. But there are certain people that just being in the same room as, when they are in their element, changes the air in the room. And I think Yamato's one of them.
Yeah.
And that's why people resonate with him so much.
I definitely agree with that. When I saw him at Prestige for the first time, Yamato Spirit hit.
Yep.
And I went nuts. And as soon as he came out, the energy in the room changed.
Yeah.
And it was like, even with people who didn't know who he was, because like to your point about the visual element of that, I think the most I see people talking about aura are usually people who only watch WWE and are talking about their very high production values.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is true that presentation is a lot of a person. There's kind of a famous quote that like Hulk Hogan was 90% presentation and 10% actual ability. People are so used to that being the only thing there is to it. And, with enough budget, you can make anyone look great.
Yeah, just about.
But how that actually translates to ring presence and gravitas and how they come across as a person and a character, I think that you don't see that in as many people as get talked about in that way.
Yeah.
I would say Okada.
Yes, I finally actually seen Okada live last year.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow missed him every other time he was in the UK.
That really true Ace quality.
Yeah.
I think Ace has been applied to a lot of people that didn't necessarily deserve it. I think Yamato completely earns that.
Yeah.
I would say I feel like Shingo kind of fits in that camp too. He's just not used that way in New Japan, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I went down to. It's only over the last year or so and a bit that I've gotten back into going to live wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
Because after the pandemic, a lot of the people that were in my social circle had kind of moved on. So I wasn't as keen on going to as many shows as I was going to before because I would be on my own, and going to shows is as much a social thing as it is about watching an entertainment product.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the shows that I just spent too much on getting a train at the last minute was because I wanted to go to High Stakes and see Shingo.
Mm-hmm.
And like with everything else that was on that card, there could have been a bunch of things on there that, like, that had the Osprey Oku match that everyone raved about. That
Mm-hmm.
had Saber. I did have to miss those matches because my trains were so messed up because it was a last minute decision and everything was rail replacement because God love the UK. But
I mean, still a better train system than North America.
okay, this is this is true. But yeah, I went to that show specifically to see Shingo. There are some people that will get you going places. If Yamato was announced for a show in fucking like Glasgow in a month or whatever, I'd be there.
Mm-hmm.
Sat here thinking about if that was happening. I've that decision is made for me. I'd go.
Yeah. Who else can I say that about?
There's a few, but it's one of those things. It's not a lot.
Yeah, I think like Swerve to some extent. I put him in that kind of like that camp. Kenny Omega, certainly.
Yeah. It's because it's there's a certain naturalness to it. It's not an affectation.
Right.
Like people do theatrical things, but the actual presence sounds trite, but you can't fake it.
Mm-hmm.
Some people just have it and some people just do not.
Yeah, and I mean there have been parts of my life when I've just been completely in my element where I know that like people have gravitated towards me more just because I had absolute confidence in my abilities.
Yes.
A few people just have that naturally because they're at the top of their game all the time and they're always in their element.
Yes.
Some people can dip in and out of that. And I mean, even Yamato, when he was in high end, I think
high end. High end.
He definitely lost a step. He was still interesting to watch. Even because I think my peak enjoyment of Dragongate was like kind of like the Mad Blanky into Berserk era.
Very strong.
And he was an absolute standout in that era.
Deranged little goblin man energy.
Oh, when he had like, when he had the dark circles under his eyes and he had the, when he, the hair taunt that he always does, but he had the length for it at the time. Just like, man, that awakened something in me. I'll say it right now.
I was going to say, I'm trying to unpack that now.
Yeah.
I remember, again, at the ETU show when we were talking, because there was that guy next to us who didn't know anything about Dragongate and was having a great time.
Yeah.
Just because he was there for ETU, didn't know any of the Dragongate guys, but was like learning and living alongside us because it was, he was stood next to me and Jinx, who were being very loud for everyone. But I remember, because he was surprised that Ultimo wasn't the main event, and he was like, "Oh, there's another match that wasn't the main event," and I was like, "No, we've got Santana versus Yamato," and we were just like, "Oh yeah, no, this is gonna bang, this is gonna be incredible," and then the guy that was stood on the other side of that guy went, "Oh yeah, Yamato's amazing, and he's so hot." It was just like. It was just this moment of community in the strangest place. And then Yamato Spirits hits and he walks out and then this guy goes, "Oh."
Yeah.
And I think that tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah. And that Prestige show that was in October 2022. Every once in a while, there is a promotion that really respects Dragon Gate and treats them like at a higher level than most other indies, because a lot of indies, they just show up and they do their match in the mid card.
They're just guys, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, like, well, they're here from Dragon Gate. They're they're pretty cool, whatever. But like ETU and Prestige are both promotions that know what they're getting. And Prestige, they had Yamato. They knew what they had with him because they put him in the main event in a title shot against Alex Shelley. Which was an incredible match.
Yep, I've seen it.
You don't get that with everybody. The fact that they knew what they had with him and they said, like, yeah, Yamato's coming, we're putting him in the main event.
I went out of my way to watch that show, even at a time when I wasn't watching a lot of wrestling, outside of just sort of vaguely watching AEW, because I wasn't back in it at that point. Again, this is a year or so before I was into Dragon Gate, because I'm a big Motor City Machine Guns fan. Because I have taste and class, I know what I'm about. I'm not 100% sure how I knew. I was just so certain that that would be an incredible match, even despite not having any specific knowledge of Yamato at that point. I think I'm just psychic like that.
And it also just, speaks to the presence of Yamato. But I think, Alex Shelley's fantastic. And
I mean,
you know what you're going to get with him.
Again, if you don't want to, don't start me on a tangent about Alex Shelley, because I will.
Well, Jay brought up something interesting one time, because he was talking about Kness at the time. It was around the time of Kness's retirement, and he was talking about how Kness was a counter wrestler in a way that not many people are. And he mentioned that Alex Shelley was the only other person he could think of who was in that sort of style. And that actually changed how I watched Alex Shelley matches, because I started looking for that style in him. And yeah, it's absolutely apparent. And I don't know if he was influenced, but given that he was a big Ring of Honor guy during Dragon Gate's involvement with ROH, then I would absolutely guess that he had some influence from them.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk about Paradox as a whole. I really like the idea that they are not just a veteran team. They're not there to step on the young kids either. They're saying, like, we need to force you up to our level.
Come up to meet us.
Yeah.
I suppose that, thinking textually about it, is it not therefore interesting that they've chosen the name Paradox to represent that? The fact that they are the veteran group and they're having to force the younger generation to step up is in itself a paradox. That's not how these things are, quote unquote, supposed to work. I think that's narratively quite interesting. I have an English degree. I'm sorry.
No, absolutely fair. I'm sure that is part of it, just because like the explanation of the name is that it is a, younger generation focused company. So how is it that the old guys are banding together and still on top of the company?
Yeah.
Which, isn't exactly a paradox, but
it's the call, though. There's the echo. I find that interesting narratively.
And going back to Yamato for a second, I think just with this Dreamgate and Bravegate run where he's not doing anything with the Bravegate and wants someone to step up, I think that only works if someone actually does it, and nobody has, and that's a little disappointing. So I think that's a bit of a misstep right now.
Maybe. I think I'm willing to see where that goes.
Yeah.
But that only because I think it might be vindicated in hindsight, depending on what does then actually happen. The implication, at the very least, is that it's at least the sort of Reiwa 6 are kind of in shambles right now, or in total shambles right now. So why would anyone step up to the Brave Gate if the so-called leaders of the new generation cannot step up to attempt to take the Dream Gate, because they've all fallen pretty much, apart from two people that haven't challenged.
Yeah, and also Shun, who beat Yamato's ass without even having the title involved. There is a certain appeal in waiting to see where it goes and being open to it, but I do think that the longer it goes without there being a challenger, the more I'm kind of annoyed by it.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that's a completely valid stance to take. It doesn't necessarily frustrate me personally, but again, I will see.
I think it leaves a gap in the mid card that could be utilized better I think the part that gets me about it is how much they built up the Brave Gate last year.
Before that, yeah.
Because there were only two champions. You know, you had Hyo at the top of the company, like the equivalent, like he brought it up to the Dreamgate level
Yeah.
with him being partners with Monte. And then when you had Dio with it,
Yeah.
you know, he kept it going and he brought it into King of Gate. And with how much both of those reigns built up the belt, it's kind of like, what are you doing putting it in stasis immediately after that?
Yes, but I also do wonder who they have who could have taken over from Dyer, like entirely conjecture.
I mean, the absolute tragic option here would be that KZ beats the Dreamgate champion, but only wins the Brave Gate.
I can't believe you do this to me. It is 1 o'clock in the morning, and you are doing this to me.
It entered my head, and I hated it, and I needed to put it out somewhere.
Why is it that we're all so obsessed with KZ not winning the Dream Gate in this way, that we all want him to, but the second that the mere concept of KZ having any happiness comes to us, we immediately decide, how do I make this tragic?
It's a defense mechanism.
It's a defense mechanism, yeah. Actually, yeah. The psychology of the Dragon Gate fan.
So Paradox having most of the belts still right now. I don't know if they weren't going to put the Triangle Gate on D-Courage at Bayside, then I'm not sure who beats them for it.
Yeah, that I think again because D-Courage not winning at that point is, I think it's playing into this sort of shambolic thing. I mean, we'll talk about this when we get to D-Courage, but there seems to be a refocusing on what that means for Kikuta, especially. But when it comes to Paradox, I think it is just going to be a matter of stepping up. Either that or D-Courage will challenge again, because it feels like it should go to D-Courage.
Mm-hmm. Maybe a different iteration of D-Courage.
Maybe.
Like if Yuki comes back and if they add Hyo, which seems likely at this point.
Maybe. I want Tanaka to have nice things.